What is the participle in this sentence in case there's a participle? Ritik, correct. Anubhi, correct. Anshul, different answer. Anybody else? Participle will be a verb that performs the function of an adjective. Tanya, correct. If I look at this sentence, there are two verbs in this sentence. One verb is rolling. The other verb is hit. Right? One verb is rolling. The other verb is hit. Out of these two, the one that modifies a noun or a pronoun is the word rolling. Why? Because rolling tells us which stones hit the boy. Right? So if I ask myself, which stones hit the boy? The answer is the rolling stones hit the boy. So rolling, technically, which is a verb, here performs the function of an adjective. So it is known as a participle. Right? It is known as a participle. Right? So any verb that performs the function of an adjective is known as a participle. Look at the next sentence. Barking dogs seldom bite. Barking dogs seldom bite. What is the participle in this sentence? Anubi, correct. Anshul, correct. Tanya, correct. The participle in this sentence is barking. Ritik, correct. Right? Which dogs seldom bite? Barking dogs seldom bite. Right? Barking, which technically is an action. Right? Barking is an action, so it's a verb. But here it performs the function of an adjective. So this becomes a participle. Right? This becomes a participle. The burnt rice was eaten by us. What is the participle in this sentence? Anubi, correct. Jobin, correct. Anshul, correct. In this sentence, Ritik, correct. The participle is burnt. Right? The participle is burnt. And which rice was eaten by us? The burnt rice was eaten by us. Right? Another simple example. The damaged house collapsed. Which house collapsed? The damaged house. Damaged is again a participle. And it refers to house. And damage technically is a verb. And damage technically is a verb. So these are some examples of participles. Right? You can just make a note over here. Right? You can just make a note over here. Just a minute, please. In the first two sentences, right? In the first two sentences, the participle is verb plus ing. Right? In the first two sentences, the participle is verb plus ing. Rolling and barking, right? So it is verb plus ing. Just make a note, these are known as past participles. Right? These are known as past participles. I'm sorry, present participles. My mistake, please. Right? Verb plus ing is known as present participle. Right? So rolling and barking are present participles. Whereas in this third example, yes, correct, Ritik. In this third example, the word burnt, you will notice that this is the third form of the verb. Right? This is the third form of the verb. Right? This is known as the past participle. Right? This is known as the past participle. So participles can be present participles if they're verb plus ing, or they can be the past participle if they're the third form of the verb. Fundamentally, participles are also modifiers because they perform the function of an adjective, and adjective by definition is a modifier. Right? So participles are also modifiers. Just like adjectives and adverbs, right? Just like adjectives and adverbs, participles can also have a single word or they can have multiple words. In all these examples that we have taken, rolling is a single word, barking is a single word, burnt is a single word, right? But we can have multi-word participles also. So for example, if I say, hearing the noise, the boy woke up. What is the participle in this sentence? Or what is the modifier in this sentence? Hearing the noise, the boy woke up. Anubi, very good. Hearing the noise, the boy woke up. What is the participle in this sentence? The participle in this sentence is hearing the noise. Tanya, correct. The participle is hearing the noise. Right? Which boy woke up? The boy who heard the noise. Right? So if I ask myself, which boy woke up? Right? Which boy woke up? The boy who heard the noise. So hearing the noise is something that has been done by the boy. So hearing the noise modifies the boy. So hearing the noise is a present participle. Right? It's a present participle. Why present participle? Because it is verb ing. Right? Hearing is verb plus ing. Right? So this is a multi-word modifier that has a participle as the modifier. Right? Participle as the base of the modifier. So this is the third kind of modifier that you can have, right? Participle. In some cases, right? In some cases, there could also be an infinitive modifier. Right? There could also be an infinitive modifier. When I say infinitive modifier, these are those modifiers that have 2 plus verb in them. Right? When I say infinitive modifiers, those modifiers that have 2 plus verb in them. For example, look at this. To clear the exam, he studied hard. What is the modifier in this sentence apart from hard? Hard is a single word adverb. Apart from hard, what is the modifier? Correct, Anubi. Jobin, partially correct. Still partially correct, Jobin. Aman, almost correct. Ritik, correct. The modifier is to clear the exam. Right? He studied hard. Who is he? The person who wanted to clear the exam. Right? The person who wanted to clear the exam. So this portion becomes the modifier. Right? This portion becomes the modifier. This is an example of an infinitive modifier. Right? This is an example of an infinitive modifier. So in general, we have defined a modifier as any word or any group of words that modifies another part of the sentence, right? Which is what is happening in all these examples, right? Which is what is happening in all these examples. please ask if there's a doubt here. Right? Please ask if there's a doubt here. So we have discussed the concept of adjectives, adverbs, participles, and to a certain extent, we have discussed the concept of infinitive modifiers also, right? But the ones that you will come across most often will be the first three. These are the three that you'll come across most often, right? In most of the questions: adjectives, adverbs, and participles. These are the three most important kinds of participles. And as I said, three most important kind of modifiers. And as I said, they can have a single word or they can have multiple words, right? Now, before we proceed further, let's do some questions, right? Just give a minute. I'll share the sheet on the WhatsApp group, right? Just give a minute, please. I'm sorry, yeah, I've shared the sheet on the WhatsApp group, so you can check. I'll open the sheet on the screen also over here. This is the sheet, VA25 Grammar 5. Okay? This sheet is primarily based on the concept of modifiers. Now, let's go past the test drive. Let's try these questions. In these questions, you have to identify the modifiers. Right? You have to identify the modifiers. There could be more than one modifier in the sentence. Right? And these modifiers will be the basic modifiers, adjectives and adverbs. Right? In these 10 sentences that we do right now, right? Questions 6 to 15, I don't think we have participles or infinitives. Right? We primarily have adjectives and adverbs over here. These sentences could have multiple modifiers, right? I don't mean multi-word modifiers necessarily. What I mean is multiple modifiers. So there may be two adverbs, two adjectives, or one adverb, one adjective, something of that kind. So what you need to do is identify the modifier and also identify what it is modifying. Right? I repeat, identify the modifier and identify what is getting modified. Right? For example, start with this question. Anubi, what you've said is correct. There are others as well. Ritik, again, what you've said is correct. There are others as well. Tanya, the modifier that you mentioned, that is correct. But what is getting modified is different. Tanya, correct. Correct. The earlier one that you mentioned, Tanya, that was also a modifier, but it was modifying something else. There are multiple modifiers in this sentence. Anybody else? Okay, let's discuss this. If you have a doubt, please ask. Right? If you have a doubt, please ask. No, man, that is a clause in the sentence. Okay, let's discuss this. The word wonderful, right? The word wonderful is an adjective. Right? The word wonderful is an adjective that is modifying the word sights, which is a noun. Right? The word wonderful is modifying sights, which is a noun. So What kind of sights did we see on a trip? We saw wonderful sights, right? So wonderful is an adjective that modifies the noun sights, right? So I'll make it like this. Here I have the modifier, and here is what is being modified. Right? So the modifier is wonderful. It is modifying the noun sights. Another modifier that we have is many. Many is also an adjective which is modifying wonderful sights, which is a noun phrase. Right? Which is a noun phrase. An adjective can modify a noun or its substitute. Right? So wonderful sights, that is a noun phrase. And it has more than one word. Right? So what is many? The wonderful sights are many. Right? And the third modifier is are, which is an adjective which is modifying the word trip, which is a noun. Please ask if there's a doubt here. There are three modifiers in this sentence. All three are adjectives. All three are modifying nouns or noun phrases. Right? Many is an adjective, wonderful is an adjective, are is an adjective. What is wonderful? The sights are wonderful. What is many? The wonderful sights are many. And what is our trip? Right? So three modifiers, all adjectives, all modifying noun components. Right? Either a noun or a noun phrase. Right? So three modifiers here. This question has a single modifier. Tell me what that modifier is. Single modifier, tell me what the modifier is. Tanya, very good, correct. Aman, different answer. Ritik, correct. Anubi, not completely wrong, but there's a better option. Ritika, correct. Ritika, I'm sorry, partially correct. Ritika. Anubi, partially correct. Jobin, correct. Okay. Ritika, correct. I usually wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Right? I usually wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. One modifier which I could say is at 6 o'clock in the morning. This portion. What does it modify? It modifies wake up. When do I wake up? At 6 o'clock in the morning. Right? Another modifier that I have over here is usually. Usually modifies again wake up. Right? Usually again modifies wake up. So either I consider the portion that comes after wake up, or I consider the portion that comes before wake up. Right? Here I have usually as an adverb that modifies the verb wake up, right? Or wake, right? Wake up or wake, which is a verb, right? Which is a verb. If I was looking for a single word modifier, the single word modifier would have been the adverb usually, right? It would have been the adverb usually. right? But I can also consider what comes after wake up to be the modifier, right? Because it modifies when I wake up, right? At 6 o'clock in the morning. So this portion together also kind of modifies wake up. But the single word modifier here was usually, which is an adverb that modifies the verb wake. Right? But otherwise, yes, to a certain extent, even at 6 o'clock in the morning, modifies wake. Okay. Next question. Try this question, please. There are a few chairs in the hall. Anshul, correct. Anshul, your second one is correct. The first one is partially correct. Ritika, also your second one is correct. The first one is partially correct. Tanya, it's partially correct. Ritik, first one is partially correct. The second one is correct. Jobin, first one partially correct. Second one is correct. Anubi, the second one is correct. Ritik, you are correct now. Okay. The first one, a few modifies chairs. Right? A few modifies chairs. Right? A few would be an adjective that modifies the noun chairs. Please note why I am considering the adjective to be a few is because if you remove the word a from here, if you say there are few chairs in the hall, the meaning changes. There is a difference between saying a few chairs and few chairs. When I say there are few chairs in the hall, it means not a lot. Right? So we don't have a lot of chairs in the hall. There are very few chairs. But when I say there are a few chairs in the hall, right? This sentence has a positive connotation. What this means is that at least some are present. Right? At least some are present. Please note the first one has a negative connotation. The second one has a positive connotation, which is why if I have to consider the modifier is a few. Right? Modifier is a few, not few. Because the moment I say few is the modifier, the meaning will completely change. So it has to be a few that modifies chairs. And secondly, in the hall is again the modifier. Where are they present? In the hall. Right? Where are they present? In the hall. So that is also the modifier. Right? There are a few chairs in the hall. Okay, what are the modifiers that you can identify in this sentence? Okay, let's do one thing. Let's focus on finding single word adjectives and adverbs. Right? Let's focus on finding single word adjectives and adverbs. So in this sentence, how many single word adjectives and adverbs can we find? Single word adjectives and adverbs. I always take a dip in the river when I visit my hometown. Anshul, correct. What does it modify? Anubi, correct. Single word adjectives and adverbs. Tanya, the answer is correct. What does it modify? Anshul, something else, something slightly different. Tanya, correct. One modifier is always, right? It's an adverb that modifies the verb take a dip. And this is verb. And so always modifies take. What do I always do? I always take a dip in the river. Right? I always take a dip in the river. So always is an adverb that modifies the verb take. The other adverb is my. The other modifier, the single word modifier adjective is my, that modifies hometown. Right? My modifies hometown. So two single word modifiers, always is an adverb that modifies take. My is an adjective that modifies hometown. Right? What is the single word adjective or adverb in this sentence? Tanya correct, Ritik correct, Anubi correct. Anshul correct. The adjective is furry, which modifies tail, which is a noun. So what kind of tail? A furry tail. And because it modifies a noun, it's an adjective. He has been treated shamefully. Single word adjective or adverb. Anshul correct. Ritik correct. Jobin correct. Tanya correct. Shamefully is the adverb. Anubi correct. Which modifies treated, which is a verb. Mount Everest is the tallest peak of the Himalayan range. Anshul correct. There's one more. Ritik, your first one is correct. Single word modifiers. We are looking for single word modifiers. Anubi correct. Single word adjectives and adverbs here. Anshul correct. Anshul correct. Tanya almost correct. Tallest is an adjective that modifies peak, which is a noun, right? And Himalayan is also an adjective which modifies range. Range is a noun, right? So we have two adjectives, tallest and Himalayan, and both of them modify nouns, right? Two different nouns in this sentence. The doctor put the patient on a wholesome diet. Single word adjective or adverb. Ritik correct. Anubi almost correct. Ritika correct. Anshul correct. Joven partially correct. There's only one modifier in terms of a single word adjective. Wholesome is an adjective that modifies diet. And diet is a noun. Right? Please note, put is not a modifier. It's an ordinary verb. Right? Put is an ordinary verb, and put is not a modifier over here. And the only modifier is wholesome, which is an adjective because it modifies the noun diet. What is the modifier here? Single word, adjective or adverb? Ritik, correct. Anubi, correct. Aman, correct. Seldom. Ritika, correct. Is an adverb because it modifies visits, which is a verb. Right? Seldom modifies visits, which is a verb. Right? So the adverb is seldom. Last question of this kind. There are three modifiers here, three single word modifiers. Anshul, good. Good, Anshul. All three correct. There are three single word modifiers here. Anubi, correct. Ritik, the last two are correct. The first one is different. Anubi, correct. Tanya, the first two are correct. Jobin, the first one is correct. Okay, the three modifiers here. Aman, the middle one is correct, the center one. Okay, let's see. The three modifiers here are enticing, very, and eagerly. These are the three modifiers. Enticing, very, and eagerly. Right? Enticing, very, and eagerly. What was, as per what is given over here, what was enticing? The package was enticing. What was very? Enticing. How enticing? Very enticing. And what was eagerly? Opened. Right? So on the left hand side, you have the modifiers. On the right hand side, you have what is modified. Enticing modifies package. Very modifies enticing. Eagerly modifies opened. Right? So how did he open it? Open is a verb. He opened it in an eager manner. So eagerly. How enticing? Very enticing. So very becomes an adverb for enticing. Right? And what did the package look like? Right? Enticing is what describes the look of the package. Right? Enticing is what describes the look of the package. Right? So three single word modifiers here. Please ask if there's a doubt in any one of these questions. Okay. Now let's come back to concepts. Right? Now let's come back to concepts. Based on what we have discussed till now, right? Based on what we have discussed till now, right? Based on everything that we have discussed till now in this class, please make a note that a modifier, right? Please make a note that a modifier should be placed as close as possible to what it modifies. Right? Please make a note of this. A modifier should be placed as close as possible to what it modifies, right? As close as possible to what it modifies. You can have a look at any one of the sentences that we have discussed till now. You will notice that in most of the cases, the modifier is placed next to what it modifies. And look at any of the examples that we have discussed till now. Like for example, to clear the exam is placed next to he. Hearing the noise is placed next to the boy. Right? Even in our other examples, rolling is placed next to stones, barking is placed next to dogs, burnt is placed next to rice. Right? Even earlier, in a rude manner is placed next to spoke. Rudely is placed next to spoke. Right? Even with the other examples, red is placed next to shirt, red in color is placed next to shirt. And so take any example that we have discussed till now. The modifier is placed as close as possible to what it modifies. And even if you have a look at the questions that we did, wonderful is placed next to site, many is placed next to wonderful sites, are is placed next to trip, right? Always is placed next to take, my is placed next to hometown. And any example, furry is placed next to tail. Right? So take any example that we have discussed so far, the modifier is placed next to what it modifies. So this is what the general concept is, that a modifier should be placed as close as possible to what it modifies. Now, when this concept is violated, right? Please make a note. When this concept is violated, it gives rise to what are known as modifier errors. Right? Whenever the above concept that a modifier should be placed as close as possible to what it modifies, when this concept is violated, it gives rise to what are known as modifier errors. The first kind of modifier error is known as a misplaced modifier. Right? The first case of modifier, the first kind of modifier error is the case of a misplaced modifier. Here what happens is, because of incorrect placement, the modifier modifies something else. And because of incorrect placement, the modifier modifies something else. That is the concept of misplaced modifier. So essentially what I'm saying is that in misplaced modifier, the position of the modifier is faulty. Right? The position of the modifier is faulty. That is the concept of a misplaced modifier. So because of incorrect placement, the modifier modifies something else. Right? So the position of the modifier is faulty. That's why it is known as misplaced modifier. Right? I'll give a very, very simple example. And very, very simple example. If I say, I want a cold glass of water, is this sentence correct? I want a cold glass of water. Is this sentence correct, or should it be something else? Is this sentence correct, or should it be something else for it to make more sense? I want a cold glass of water. Ritik, absolutely correct. Anubi, absolutely correct. Anshul, absolutely correct. That is what the sentence should be, right? Actually, this sentence should be, I want a glass of cold water. This is the sentence that makes more sense, right? This is the sentence that makes more sense because the modifier cold, in all likelihood, what I want is the water to be cold in all likelihood. I don't want a glass that is cold and which has normal water in it, right? In all likelihood, what I want is a glass that has cold water in it. So the modifier cold should be placed as close as possible to what it modifies. In the earlier sentence, cold was placed next to glass. So it was the glass that was supposed to be cold, which is not likely what I meant. And maybe what I meant was I want a glass of cold water. Now, just listen to my next point very carefully. The first sentence, I want a cold glass of water, necessarily it wasn't grammatically wrong. Right? I repeat, the first sentence, I want a cold glass of water. Technically, it's not grammatically wrong, but semantically, right? We have discussed the concept of semantics and syntax. Semantics is implication. Semantics is the meaning. Semantically, the second sentence is much better than the first one, right? So the first one is not completely grammatically wrong, but the second sentence is grammatically correct. Moreover, it is semantically appropriate. What is semantics? Semantics is meaning, right? Semantics is what you are trying to say. It is the implication. So implication wise, the second one makes a lot more sense, even though the first one is not completely grammatically wrong, right? But in the first sentence, what we say is that we have a misplaced modifier, right? We have a misplaced modifier. So the placement of the modifier is faulty. And because the placement is faulty, it ends up modifying something else in the sentence. It should have modified water, but it ends up modifying glass. Another sentence. If I say, he tries to kill himself often, right? He tries to kill himself often. Where is the sentence going wrong? The sentence is wrong. Where is it going wrong? He tries to kill himself often. Anubi, correct. Anshul, correct. Ritika, correct. This adverb, often, this adverb should actually have come over here. The sentence should have been, he often tries to kill himself. Right? The sentence should have been, he often tries to kill himself. Ritik, correct. Because often refers to something which is done repeatedly. In the sentence as it is, if I consider the word often to come at the end, then what is it placed next to? It is placed next to killing himself. Now, please note, killing himself again and again is not possible. What is possible is that the attempt is made again and again. So logically, the sentence should be, he often tries to kill himself. Because logically, the term often should go with tries. Right? Because the attempt can be made again and again. So again, in the first sentence, we had an error of a misplaced modifier. The placement was wrong. The meaning that it gave the sentence made no sense. Right? The meaning that it gave the sentence made no sense. So this is the concept of a misplaced modifier. Right? Okay. The next kind of modifier error is a squint modifier. The next kind of modifier error is a squint modifier. Right? Squint modifier. Here what happens is a modifier placed in between a sentence modifies what is present on either side of it. Right? A modifier placed in between a sentence modifies what is present on either side of it. That is the concept of a squint modifier. Right? A modifier placed in between a sentence modifies what is present on either side of it. Right? I'll give you a very simple example. Look at this sentence. Running quickly makes me breathless. Right? Running quickly makes me breathless. This sentence seems to be correct. Right? This sentence seems to be correct. But if you notice the modifier quickly and ask yourself, as per the meaning of this sentence, what is happening quickly? Does this sentence mean that when I run fast, that is when I run quickly, I get breathless? Or does it mean that whenever I run, no matter how I run, I quickly get breathless? I hope all of you understand where the ambiguity is. The ambiguity is that in this sentence, the modifier quickly is placed next to running as well as next to makes, which means that interpretation wise, it can have two interpretations. One interpretation could be that running quickly, and whenever I run fast or quickly, I get breathless. The other interpretation is whenever I run, no matter how I run, fast or slow, I quickly get breathless. Please note, this sentence is ambiguous. This sentence has multiple interpretations for the simple reason that the modifier is modifying on both the sides. So because it is modifying on both the sides, it is giving us multiple interpretations. Right? It is giving us multiple interpretations. Right? This is the concept of a squint modifier. Such sentences need to be changed so that the meaning becomes clear. So for example, if I remove the word quickly and make it fast, now the sentence is absolutely clear. Now it means that running fast makes me breathless. Right? Running fast makes me breathless. But with the word quickly, there was ambiguity. Right? Please ask if there's a doubt here. Squint modifiers will lend ambiguity to a sentence. Look at this other example. The store that had the big sale recently went bankrupt. The store that had the big sale recently went bankrupt. Where is the error in the sentence? There is a problem with the word recently. Anshul, correct. There is a problem with the word recently. Because right now what is happening is the word recently is placed next to went bankrupt, and it is also placed next to had the big sale. So the problem is in the given sentence, I cannot be sure what has happened recently, right? I cannot be sure what has happened recently, right? Does it refer to the sale happening recently or does it refer to recently going bankrupt? So that is where again there is ambiguity because the word recently is modifying on both the sides, right? The term recently is modifying on both the sides. One way of correcting it is to move the word recently here, right? The store that recently had the big sale, right? The store that recently had the big sale, right? Tanya, correct. The store that recently had the big sale went bankrupt. So if I say that, then the meaning is absolutely clear, right? The store that recently had the big sale, then the meaning becomes absolutely clear. Or otherwise I say the store that had the big sale has recently gone bankrupt, right? So if I want recently to refer to going bankrupt, then I will say the store that had the big sale has recently gone bankrupt. But essentially in its correct form, the sentence does not make a lot of change. I'm sorry, does not make a lot of sense, right? In its current form, it requires change to be done, right? It requires change to be done. Okay, so this is the concept of a squint modifier. The third one, the third and the last modifier error that we have is the concept of a dangling modifier, right? The concept of a dangling modifier, right? From an exam perspective, this one is the most important one. Squint modifiers are very rarely seen in the exam, right? Squint modifiers, they're very rarely seen. Misplaced modifiers are sometimes seen, but the one that is seen the most often is the concept of a dangling modifier. Look at this sentence. I'll take the example first, then I'll define it. While reading a book, the dog bit me. Right? The sentence says, while reading a book, the dog bit me. What is the modifier in the sentence? The modifier in the sentence is while reading a book. What does the basic concept of modifier state? The basic concept states that a modifier is placed as close as possible to what it modifies. So if the modifier is while reading a book, this is a participle modifier. And reading ing, this is a participle modifier. It is placed next to the dog. So this sentence as it is, it implies that the dog was reading the book and while reading the book, the dog bit me. So unless I want to say that the dog was reading the book, right? Unless I want to say that, the sentence is not correct, right? So if I don't want to say that the dog was reading the book, the sentence is not correct, right? If I have to correct this sentence, right? If I have to correct the sentence, I can correct the sentence in two ways. I can say, while reading a book, I was bitten by the dog. Right? While reading a book, I was bitten by the dog. So now it is very clear that I was reading the book because as per modifiers, you place the modifier next to what it modifies. Right? So now in the second sentence, I'm saying that I was reading a book and while I was reading a book, I was bitten by the dog. So this is one way to correct the sentence. The other way to correct the sentence is that I change the first part and I say, while I was reading a book, the dog bit me. right? While I was reading a book, the dog bit me. So again, now it's clear who was reading the book, right? So the last two sentences are correct, whereas the first one is said to have a dangling modifier, right? The first one is said to have a dangling modifier. From the perspective of this example, let me define the concept of a dangling modifier, right? I'll define it in a way that differentiates it from a misplaced modifier, right? I'll define it in a way that differentiates it from a misplaced modifier. And this is just for understanding purposes, right? Just for understanding purposes. A dangling modifier is one when the subject, right? A dangling modifier is one when the subject is either misplaced or missing, right? Please make a note of this. Dangling modifier is when the subject is either misplaced or missing. That is the concept of a dangling modifier. Please differentiate dangling modifier from misplaced modifier. In a misplaced modifier, it was the modifier that was misplaced, right? For example, if you look at these sentences, the modifier was misplaced, right? So in a misplaced modifier, the modifier is misplaced, but in a dangling modifier, it is the subject that is misplaced or is missing, right? So in this case, while reading a book, the dog bit me. The problem is not with the position of the modifier. The problem is with the placement of the subject, which I am correcting in the next two sentences. Right? In the next two sentences, you will see that I have not changed the modifier. All I have done is I have changed the subject position. So that is what happens in case of a dangling modifier. And it's basically the modifier gets attached to the wrong subject, and because the subject is misplaced or missing. Right? This is dangling modifier. Another example, walking down the street, the lamps came on. Walking down the street, the lamps came on. What is the participle modifier? The participle modifier is walking down the street. Right? The participle modifier is walking down the street. What is it placed next to? It is placed next to the lamps. So in this sentence, it seems as if the lamps were walking down the street. And while the lamps were walking down the street, they came on, which doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Lamps are inanimate objects which cannot walk down the street, right? But in this case, you will notice that it does not say who was walking down the street. So in that case, you can add a subject of your choice. So I can say, while I was walking down the street, the lamps came on. So what I have done was the subject that was missing, I have introduced that subject. So in this case, I have said while I was walking down the street. If you want, you can also say while we were walking down the street, while they were walking down the street, or while he was walking down the street. You can add any subject because the subject is missing in the original sentence. So you can add any subject of your choice and you can correct the sentence. But the fundamental problem was that the modifier did not have the correct subject. The subject was missing in this sentence. So what we have done is we have added the subject. So this is again an example of a dangling modifier. Right? This is again an example of a dangling modifier. Look at one last sentence. to get a better score, the exam was taken again by him. To get a better score, the exam was taken again by him. Note this is an infinitive modifier, right? It is 2 plus verb, infinitive modifier. What is it placed next to? It is placed next to the exam. Here it seems as if the exam wanted to get a better score, right? But logically, it makes sense that this person wanted to get a better score. That is why he took the exam again, right? So if I want to correct the sentence, I'll say to get a better score, he took the exam again, right? To get a better score, he took the exam again. So now the modifier is placed next to the correct subject, right? These are all examples of dangling modifiers, right? This is again an example of a dangling modifier. So when I say dangling modifier, the original sentence had a dangling modifier, right? Here also the original sentence had a dangling modifier. The next sentences are the corrected sentences. These are the three modifier errors: misplaced modifiers, squint modifiers, dangling modifiers. Squint modifiers, chances are very few that will come across them, right? Very less chances. Then misplaced modifiers, but the most important one is the dangling modifier error, right? Let's do some questions, right? Let's do some questions. Let's come back to the sheet. Try to correct the errors in the sentences. A wind swept strong through the countryside. What is wrong with this question? Tanya, correct. Ritika, correct. Ritik, correct. This actually should be a strong wind swept through the countryside. A strong wind swept through the countryside. So this word strong, this should have come over here, right? The word strong should have come next to wind. So the word strong was misplaced, right? A strong wind swept through the countryside, because strong should modify wind, right? Strong should modify wind. Wind is a noun, so strong becomes an adjective, right? This was an example of a misplaced modifier. How do you correct this sentence? Anshul, correct. Ritik, almost correct. Anubi, correct. Tanya, correct. Jobin, correct. This should be Sue sat silently. Sue sat silently throughout the meal. Right? Sue sat silently throughout the meal. Right? So silently should come here. Right? Sue sat silently throughout the meal. Because what has happened silently is that she sat in that manner. Right? So Sue sat silently throughout the meal. How do you correct this sentence? Tanya, correct. Jobin correct, Anshul correct, Aman correct, Anubi correct. This should be we completed the task with minimum difficulty. Okay? We completed the task with minimum difficulty. Ritik correct. Next one. Ritik correct. Tanya correct. Jobin correct. Aman different answer. Anshul correct. This should be even though. He performed even though he didn't feel well. Right? Anubi correct. He performed even though he didn't feel well. Next question. In this sentence, what is happening is, if you look at this portion, which he had bought yesterday, Tanya correct. Correct. Anshul correct. That is the correct construction. This should be Joan left her new wallet, which she had bought yesterday, at her friend's home. Right? I'll write it down here. Joan left her new wallet, comma, which she had bought yesterday, comma, at her friend's home. Right? This is the correct sentence. Because which she had bought yesterday refers to the new wallet. Her friend's home she had not bought yesterday. Right? So Joan had not purchased her friend's home yesterday. And she had purchased her new wallet yesterday, which she left at her friend's home. Right? So again, misplaced modifier. Right? Again, misplaced modifier. How do you correct the sentence? This is a dangling modifier now. Before this, most of them were misplaced modifiers. This is a dangling modifier now. I hope all of you can identify where the sentence is going wrong. Tanya, that has almost the same problem as the earlier one. Anshul, correct. Anshul, correct. Anubi, almost correct. Okay, first let's understand where the issue is in this sentence. The issue is that, Ritik, almost correct. The issue is that exercising on the treadmill every day, this is the modifier. And this is the participle modifier. Why participle modifier? Because it is verb plus ing. Right? This is the modifier. What is it placed next to? It is placed next to his stamina. So this sentence implies that his stamina used to exercise on the treadmill every day. Right? So the stamina was doing the exercising, and that is how it got built up. Whereas it could not have been his stamina that was exercising every day. It was he who was exercising every day. Right? So if I have to correct this sentence, one way of correcting this sentence is as he exercised on the treadmill every day, TM is treadmill, every day, his stamina was built up. This is one way of correcting it. Right? This is one way of correcting it. Another way of correcting it is exercising. Ritik, just give me a minute, I'll come to your doubt. The other way to correct this is exercising on the treadmill every day. He built up his stamina. Right? In this case, it becomes clear who was exercising on the treadmill. And exercising on the treadmill every day, he built up his stamina. Right? Or else what I can say is he built up his stamina by exercising on the treadmill every day. Even that's correct. Okay, Ritik, what you're saying is, aren't we changing the tense of the sentence? See, the tense of the sentence won't change because the tense of the sentence is primarily coming from here, was built up, right? Was built up and exercised, right? Which more or less is the past. So the tense is not changing, right? The tense is not changing. The implication remains the same, right? So either one of these two, exercising on the treadmill every day, he built up his stamina, or I say he built up his stamina by exercising on the treadmill every day. Even that's correct, right? But essentially the problem is that his stamina could not have been exercising on the treadmill, right? It was he who was exercising on the treadmill. Try this one. Here, if I have to correct this sentence, Ritik, correct. That is absolutely correct. Being a traveling salesman, right? Being a traveling salesman, my father bought, or a better word maybe would be sent, exciting gifts from different places to my mother. Say, if it is bought, it will be for. If it is sent, it will be to. Right? So that preposition will change accordingly. But either ways, it's fine. Right? Being a traveling salesman, my father bought exciting gifts from different places for my mother, or sent exciting gifts from different places to my mother. And both correct. I would prefer the second version because the original sentence is received, right? So sent makes more sense, right? So this is what the correct sentence would look like. Being a traveling salesman, this is what the modifier is, right? This is what the modifier is. It refers to my father, right? So this would be the correct sentence. Okay. Again, dangling modifier in this question. The problem with this sentence is the participle modifier sitting in the park is placed next to vandalism. So in this sentence, it seems as if the vandalism was sitting in the park. Anshul, correct. I can say while I was sitting in the park. Anubi, also correct. The vandalism of public property was clear to me. Right? While I was sitting in the park, the vandalism of public property was clear to me. Or else I can say, Ritik, it means destruction, unwanted destruction. And when you spoil something unnecessarily, that is vandalism. That is for no reason at all. Destruction or spoiling something. Or else I can say sitting in the park, I could clearly see the vandalism of public property. And either ways, it's fine. And either ways, it's fine. While I was sitting in the park, the vandalism of public property was clear to me. The first one is also correct. The second one, sitting in the park, I could clearly see the vandalism is also correct because we are playing I next to the modifier. Right? So both correct. Right? Both correct. Again, dangling modifier in this sentence. Ritik, correct. Anubi, correct. Ritika, correct. Tanya, that again would be a dangling modifier because what is given after the comma would not be walking through the market. And that again would be a dangling modifier. I can say, as I walked through the market, the smell of fish assaulted my nostrils. This is one way. Or else I can say, while I was walking through the market, right, the smell of fish assaulted my nostrils. The fundamental problem with this sentence is the modifier walking through the market. It's going to modify what comes immediately after it. So in the original sentence, it seems that the modifier is modifying the smell of the fish. The smell of fish could not have been walking through the market, right? It was I who was walking through the market, right? So that has to be made clear, right? That has to be made clear. In this particular question, it is very difficult to correct the error by keeping the first part to be the same. Right? In the earlier questions, there was a way to correct the error by keeping the first part the same. But in this question, it becomes very complicated. If I don't want to change the first part, it is much easier to change the first part. Right? It is much easier to change the first part. And because it kind of becomes very awkward construction, grammatical construction, if I keep the first part the same. Right? Because essentially what I want after the first part is the word I. Right? I cannot have smell of fish. I cannot have my nostrils. I require the word I because I was walking through the market. And this will become very complex or I'll say awkward construction. So we change the first part in one of these two ways. The sentence is correct. Okay, this one. In this sentence, what's happening is around the age of 10 is placed next to the boarding school. So in this sentence, it seems as if the boarding school was 10 years old when it became my home. Ritik, correct. I can also say when I was around the age of 10, the boarding school became my home. When I was around the age of 10, the boarding school became my home. Right? So it's clear who was around the age of 10. Right? I was around the age of 10. Right? Because in the earlier sentence, it seems as if when the boarding school turned 10 years old, that is when it became my home. Right? It's not completely impossible, but it's unlikely that I would talk about the age of the boarding school and that is when it became my home. And more likely is that I'm talking about my age and at what age of mine did it become my home. And so better sentences, when I was around the age of 10, the boarding school became my home. Or else with a very slight change in meaning, right? Or else with a very slight change in meaning, you can say around the age of 10, I made the boarding school my home. Right? Very minor change in the implication. And around the age of 10, I made the boarding school my home. And with a very fine change in meaning. But even that's correct. So these are all questions on modifier errors. As you would have seen, a lot of these questions were based on dangling modifiers. Right? A lot of questions were based on dangling modifiers. Some of them were based on misplaced modifiers. Right? I don't think we had a question on a squint modifier anywhere here. Those questions are very rarely seen in the exam. Right? Okay, I'll just take 4-5 minutes more. Right? I'll just take 4-5 minutes more. Let's try a couple of multiple choice questions. Right? Try question 26. Question 26. Yeah, this question. Ritik, very good. Anubi, correct. That is the answer. Tanya, good. Correct. That is the answer. Ritika, correct. Okay, I'm sorry. Ritik, Anubi, Tanya, Ritika. I'm sorry, it's a different answer. And what you have marked is a close option, but there's a better option. Right? Ritika, Tanya, Anubi, Ritik. There's a better option. Anubi, correct. That is the correct answer. Good. Ritik, correct. Those of you who are now getting the right answer, just compare it with the option marked earlier. Just see where that difference is. Jobin, different answer. That's a very close option. There's a better answer. Jobin, different answer. Okay, let's see. See, option 1 is wrong. And option 1 is wrong. Option 1 says when he's being a connoisseur and collector of some note, to which fact the house amply attested he was frequently away on foraging expeditions, right? This says when he is being, right? This doesn't make sense. Now options 2, 3 and 4. Anubi, correct. Correct, Anubi. Now between options 2, 3 and 4, options 2 and 3, these are close options, right? Options 2 and 3, these are close options. Now, if you compare options 2 and 3, you'll notice that the difference is where you have placed this part. To which house, to which fact the house on Curzon Street with its fine furnishing and elegant apartment simply attested. In the second option, it's coming right at the end. In the third option, this portion is coming in between, right? That's the difference. So it's all in the placement. But have a look at the language of this underlined portion. It says to which fact the house amply attested. It means that the house, the way it was decorated, it supported a particular fact. So now I have to ask myself, what was the fact to which the decoration of the house supported? The decoration of the house could have supported the fact that he was a connoisseur and collector of some note. The problem with the second option is that when I say to which fact, in the second option, it refers to he was frequently away. Now, the fact that he was frequently away does not get supported by the fact that his house was furnished in a good manner. But his house was furnished in a good manner. Yes, that completely supports that he was a connoisseur and collector of some note. That is why his house was furnished in a good manner. Right? That is where option 3 becomes a better option than option 2. Right? It becomes a better option than option 2. Option 4, please notice, has the same problem as with the second option. Option 4 says he was frequently away on foraging expeditions, to which fact the house attested. Right? Again, the fact that he was away is not what is getting supported by the thing that his house is furnished in a very good manner. Right? The answer is option 3, because the house being furnished or decorated in a very good manner supports the fact that he was a connoisseur and collector of some note. Right? So it is all about the placement of this part to which the house amply attested. Right? That is where option 3 is correct. Essentially, it was again a case of a part of a sentence that was misplaced. Right? A part of a sentence that was misplaced. But the sentence was kind of long over here. That is why it kind of got confusing. Right? Let's do one last question, then we'll stop. Right? The rest you can try by yourselves. Right? Try this question. Anya, correct. Very good. That's the right answer. Anubi, different answer. Ritik, different answer. Ritik, different answer. Ritika, correct. That's the correct answer. Okay, the answer here is option 1. The best answer here is option 1. If you have a look at what's happening in option 1, it says with a view to expediting tax assessments. Right? With a view to expediting tax assessments, the revenue department, right? So who has the view to expedite tax assessments? The revenue department, right? Proposes to make it mandatory for taxpayers to file IT returns as well as revised returns by March end of the assessment year, right? So this makes perfect sense. What has come in the beginning before the comma refers to the revenue department as per what's given in this sentence. And as per what's given in the sentence, it refers to the revenue department, and then it tells us what the revenue department proposes to do, right? Option 2, the problem is it says by March end of the assessment year with a view to expedite tax assessments. Right? Here, there is no clear connection between a view to expedite tax assessments and revenue department, which was there in the first option. Option 3 says the revenue department, comma, with a view to expediting tax assessments. Ideally, there should have been a comma here for it to make sense. And because if I put a comma here, then yes, this refers to the revenue department. And the rest of it, I guess, is the same as what is there in the first sentence, right? But logically, there should have been a comma over here. The fourth option, the revenue department proposes to make it mandatory for taxpayers with a view to expediting tax assessments, right? Here it seems as if the taxpayers should be or have a view to expediting tax assessments. This is completely wrong, right? This is completely wrong. Option 4 makes it seem as if those taxpayers who have a view to expediting tax assessment, it is for those taxpayers for whom it has been made mandatory. Right? Option 1 is correct. Right? Option 1 is correct. So another example of a question that is based on errors related to modifiers. My suggestion is in the beginning, these questions might take some time because the answer options can seem very close. And so when you're practicing the remaining question in the sheet, take as much time as you want, but focus on accuracy. In case you do not get the answer right, once you look at the answer and I'll send across the answers. And when you look at the answers, try to justify why the correct answer is correct and why the others are not correct. In case you have any doubts in any of the questions, please ask. And please ask either in the next class or you can put it on the WhatsApp group. Right? But please ask in case you have a doubt with any of the questions in the sheet. Right? Some of them are difficult questions, but doable questions once you are able to understand clearly what part is modifying what part of the sentence. Right? So we'll stop here. Thanks a lot. Our next session will also be a grammar session. Right? We'll discuss grammar in the next session also. Thanks.